I break it down to its essence that your success in life is a reflection of how well you can deal with bullshit.
Yes.
You can deal with bullshit very well, you're going to be successful. If bullshit gets you down and keeps you down, you're going to struggle.
Welcome to the Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast, the #1 resource for automotive sales professionals, managers, and owners to learn how to make money, accumulate wealth, and to all out ball out in the auto industry. And now your hosts, Sean V. Bradley and L.A. Williams.
Hey everybody, this is Sean V. Bradley, creator of the Millionaire Car Salesman and president of Dealer Synergy. I got me a super duper VIP guest right here. I got Mr. Weldon Long. Weldon, say hello to everybody.
Thank you so much, Sean. I'm excited to be here, and hello to your audience, and looking forward to the conversation, my friend.
Oh, that's what's up. Okay, so let me kind of just give you a little bit of background because I'm not as sophisticated as Mr. Bradley is. I'm a car salesman. And so the name of the podcast is Millionaire Car Salesman because, I truly believe that everybody in the automotive industry can become a millionaire, multi-millionaire by car sales. Not saying necessarily that they'll make $1 million a year, but we actually have a couple of them. Well, have you ever heard of a guy named Ali Reda?
I have not, Sean.
All right, so check this out. I'm going to tell you two names. There's a guy named Ali Reda. He actually broke the Guinness Book of World Records in 2017. This guy sold 1,580 units. That comes out to 131 cars a month. What's crazy, Weldon, is that this guy that sells 131 cars a month compared to the national average of only 9.6. So, of course, this guy's, like a unicorn that farts Skittles. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, that's like a whole car dealership. That one guy.
No, it's actually more. The average dealership sells less than 100 cars. The profile is, as of 2019, the average car dealership has 10 salespeople, 2 sales managers, a GM, GSM to only sell 96 cars. So this guy sells over 30% by himself. So there's something special. So my question for you as we go into this, and I kind of shut up and let you freestyle for a little bit here is, I want you to help me talk about what it takes to be first successful, wealthy, and make that money. And so let's go there. Let's start with, I want you to answer that question before we get into your background on purpose. What do you think some of the keys to being wealthy and successful in 2019 and beyond are?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. And I really think it comes down to 3 things. There's kind of a 3-part process, 3-piece puzzle, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of times we have only one of the 3 pieces. And that core centerpiece of success, of course, is, kind of the sales process, the stuff that you teach, in terms of, how do I take a prospect from point A to point B to point C? That, of course, is critically important in having a process to do that. But there's 2 bookends that I think are critically important that really enhance our ability to be successful. The first bookend is what I call the prosperity mindset. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Power of Consistency, and it's really a book about how do you create a mindset that is geared and programmed to thrive in the face of adversity. The reality is, just like in the real world, in real life, personal life, and the car business, you're going to face challenges. You're going to face customers who want to price shop you. They want to think about it. They want to go home and talk to their wives. You're going to have all these obstacles that try to come between you and success. The key is having the prosperity mindset, a mindset that is geared and programmed to thrive in the face of adversity and to prosper in the face of those challenges. Many people, as you know, Sean, they operate under the misconception that at some point things are going to get easy, that somehow all the obstacles are going to magically go away. They're never going away, right? That defies just real life on this planet. The key is having the prosperity mindset that is so focused on achieving its core objectives and doing the things on a daily, consistent basis that we know produce success. Then that, combined with the sales process, creates powerful, powerful results. The other bookend is consistency itself. In other words, in the mindset, you got to think about what you think about, right? What are my habitual thoughts? In the sales process, what am I doing? What am I saying? The key with the consistency is to think the right things and do the right things on a consistent basis. When you put those 3 things together, success is just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if.
Oh my gosh, it's strong. But you turn around and said, being able to do all this even in adversity. What do you know about adversity? That's a good segue for you to kind of tell your background. You know what I mean? So tell everybody a little bit about you, sir, about what you've gone through and your journey to where you're at today.
Yeah, so when I was a younger man, I was a glutton for punishment. I spent 25 years of my life on the streets. I spent 13 years in the state and federal prison systems, and was a ninth grade high school dropout and a complete knucklehead. In my 13 years from 1987 until 2003, that roughly 16 years, I spent 13 of those years walking prison yards. And about halfway through that process in 1996, I was in federal prison on money laundering charges related to a telemarketing company I'd been doing some work for. And my father died on June 10th of 1996. And I was 32 years old when that happened. I'd already done about 6.5 years in prison. I was a total knucklehead and a total loser. And when my dad died, I made a decision that I needed to change the course of my life. And so I began embarking on this journey that began initially just by reading books. All the books that you've read, all the books many of your listeners and your students have read from, I tell people I started with the Bible and I ended with Tony Robbins and everything in between. And so I started learning, and the very first book I picked up on this journey was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I began reading that book, and I remember sitting in my prison cell just the afternoon after my father died. In this act of desperation, I grabbed this book that I found. And Dr. Covey talked about you have the ability to live out of your imagination rather than your past. And I remember being so excited about that because my past was violence and drugs and prison. But I had this man telling me that I had the ability to live out of my imagination. And so those little tidbits of information, I began to study and read and everything I get my hands on. And eventually got to the point of understanding that my thoughts, my habitual thoughts were creating my life. I remember one time reading that Nietzsche said, we attract that which we fear. And in the Bible, Job said, that which I have feared has come upon me. And Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl said, fear may come true. So I kept reading all these books about how you could attract bad things into your life. So I sat down at the little metal desk in my cell and I wrote down all the things I was afraid of. Well, living and dying in prison, never being a father to my son, being broke and being homeless my whole life. And I realized, wow, my life is a perfect reflection of all the chaos in my brain. Wow. So I decided I needed to start thinking about different things. So I sat back down at that same metal desk and I wrote out what a perfect life for me would look like. I'm an awesome father to my son. I'm wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I'm a man of honor, character, and integrity. I have a beautiful, amazing wife I can love and trust. I have beautiful homes in Colorado and Maui and all these. I mean, you'd have thought I was a madman if you'd have seen me at that point because my life was so desperate and so pathetic. But I took that list, Sean, a sheet of paper, I stuck toothpaste in the back of it, and I stuck it to the wall of my cell. And for the next 7 years, every single morning, I would review that list, imagine what it would be like to be that person, have that life. Napoleon Hill said you have to imagine yourself already in possession of these things. So I started just imagining it was all true. And I didn't understand the neuroscience back in those days, but it literally changed my expectation and my thought processes, the neural connectors of my brain. 7 years later, I walk out of the joint. I'm a whole different person. I go out there. I'm 39 years old. I get to a homeless shelter. It's the only place I had to go. I got a job selling air conditioners. Turned out I was really good at it. A year later, I opened my own company. I grew that to $20 million in revenue over 5 years. I sold it, started writing books and speaking. And all that I say to say this. Your question was, what do I know about adversity? Well, I know almost everything about adversity. Now, granted, mine was self-imposed, and sometimes people deal with adversity that is visited upon them. But in my case, it was self-imposed, but that didn't make it any easier to deal with.
Wait a minute, brother. Let's slow down because you're hitting him with I wish I had Brad. He's got those knowledge bomb like sound effects. I'll be dropping some bombs on you right here. Let me just extract some things that are powerful. So you Covey, and we talked about this. Me and my wife have been, facilitators and trainers, and actually the official partners in the automotive sector for 13 years. We got to train with Dr. Covey before. It was one of my big honors, and it's really awesome to talk to somebody high level that understands it. So let's go through this. Covey says that things have to be created twice, first mentally and then physically. This is the thing that you had quoted from, Napoleon Hill, but also been put out there from is it Bob Proctor and Rhonda Byrne from The Secret? So let's talk about that because a lot of people have seen the documentary and I know it's deeper, more PhD level on a Covey level, but then more just easy to digest. The laws of attraction. Do you believe in that concept that, in the laws of attraction, manifestation?
I absolutely do. And Dr. Covey used to call it the conscious and unconscious serendipity of the universe.
Explain that. I want you to, because, you're intellectual, you're highly successful, but there's certain people, like a lot of people out there, unfortunately, they're like, that's bullshit. That's like fugazi, like transcendental stuff. I would like, from a very serious dude like yourself, to be able to kind of translate that to some of the people that might be skeptical that it's not right for them because it sounds too foo-foo. How do you kind of give a reality check to it?
No, listen, I'm so glad you asked that question, because when I first started reading this stuff, a lot of it I found very mystical, and almost religious in some connotations. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't get my mind around it. What I was looking for was something very pragmatic I could sink my teeth into. I eventually, through my own work, developed a process called the upside of fear. And fear is an acronym for focus, emotional commitment, action, and responsibility. And it's those four things. The law of attraction is simply a reflection of what happens in the brain. And real quick, there's 4 steps that happen. When you have a thought, any thought in your brain, good, bad, happy, or sad, it produces a corresponding chemical. So if I have a happy thought, my brain produces endorphins and dopamine, right? That's my emotion. So my emotions are a chemical reflection of my thoughts. If I get frightened, my brain starts producing epinephrine and adrenaline, and I have a frightened emotion. So the first thing people have to understand, this stuff is not mystical, magical, or like you said, frilly foo-foo. It's neuroscience. You have a thought, chemicals kick off in your brain that trigger the emotion. Once you have the emotion, that drives some reaction, and those actions drive the results. So thoughts, emotions, actions, results. It's a chemical neurological process. Here's the crazy part. Your emotions and your actions are a chemical and a physiological reflection of your thoughts in your brain and in your body. That's neuroscience. That's not hocus pocus. Here's the crazy part. Our emotions and our actions are a reflection of our thoughts, even if the thought is wrong or inaccurate. This is the scary part, right? Let me give you a quick example. You're walking through the parking lot at night with your family after the movie in the theater. You leave the theater 11 o'clock at night. Some guy comes running around the corner. He's running towards you screaming. He's got a knife in his hand. He's covered in blood. And your immediate thought is danger, danger, danger. This person intends to do some harm to my family. Within a nanosecond, your brain is producing epinephrine and adrenaline. And your emotion now is that heightened sense of urgency, fear, anxiety. And what actions do you have to take? You got to fight or you got to flee. Well, you can't run because you got kids with you, so you stay and fight. You stand up to the guy. He comes near you. You attack him. You knock him in the jaw. You drop him like a sack of potatoes. What's the result? You protected your family. So the thought triggered the emotion, the reaction, the result. So far, so good, right? Until the police show up. When the police show up and the guy regains consciousness, you realize that you misinterpreted the situation. The guy was no threat to you whatsoever. The knife was fake. The blood was fake. It was a teenage kid running across the parking lot to meet some friends for a Halloween party. You assaulted a perfectly innocent teenager. But listen, even though your thought turned out to be wrong, how real were the emotions?
Right.
How real was your reaction? How real was his permanently broken jaw? Right? So we can create very real emotions and very real actions and very permanent results out of false thoughts. And that's all the law of attraction really is. If you're thinking negative, scarcity stuff, you're going to trigger emotions in your body that are consistent with negativity and scarcity. What actions are you going to engage in? Negative, scarce actions. What results are you going to produce? Negative, scarce results. So there's no hocus pocus. There's no mysticism to it. It's neuroscience. It's basic neuroscience.
So let's say people are like, wait a minute, okay, this is different. This is coming from a real serious dude, New York Times bestselling author, highly successful. Man, maybe this isn't foo-foo, but where do I start? That's like trying to tell somebody they need to turn around and get into Ashtanga yoga. You know what I mean? Like they can't meditate. Like they have ADD. They tried meditating 50 million times. They feel stupid. They feel awkward. So they're like, fuck it, I'm never going to meditate. So let's just say that you just captured one of our audience's, attention. And where do they start? How do they discipline themselves to start trying to think positive thoughts? Can you break it down Forrest Gump simple, whether you're in a prison cell, you're at a dealership that could be a prison cell, or you're like in the car listening to this shit? What should they say? What's the very first thing to start that proactive mindset, that mindset of abundance, the attracting the things that you want? Break it down for us, brother.
So I break it down to 4 components, FEAR. Step 1 is F, focus. You got to get focused, specifically focused on what you want in your life in 3 core elements. Your money, which is your career and your financial security, your relationships, which are your family, your friends, your community, and your health, your mental, spiritual, and physical health. What do you really and truly want in each of those areas? And you got to be specific, right? So maybe it's a specific income goal, right? $500,000 a year. Maybe it's a specific relationship goal. I want to be a 10 as a husband. Maybe it's a specific health goal. I want to run a marathon. Or maybe it's a spiritual health goal. You want to be a deacon in your church. You got to figure out, what do you really want to achieve? You got to get focused, right? When Stephen Jobs, before he passed away, he was interviewed and they asked him the key to the success of Apple's. He said, focus and simplicity. So you got to first step back and think about what you're going to be thinking about before you think about it. What do I want? Once you figure out what you want, I'll use an income example. Let's say you say, what I want is a $500,000 a year income. What 1 or 2 things do you have to do every single day to get that, to move one step closer? Not 100 things. What are the first 1 or 2? 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step, right? So what are the 1 or 2 things I have to do every single day? So focus is, what do I want and what do I need to do? What 1 or 2 things? Keep it simple. I want this. I got to do this. Then the key is, what limiting beliefs are stopping you from doing those things? Limiting beliefs about money, wealth, right? My dad used to tell me when I was a kid that rich people were crooks. You know, I'd ask for something. He'd say, well, who do you think we are, the Rockefellers? You know, so my family had a very scarce mindset about money. By the way, everybody in your audience is affected by the Great Depression because everybody's 1 or 2 generations removed from it. And what did we learn about money in the Great Depression? That only the select rich people had it, and we all thought they were crooks, us poor people. We had a name for them. They were called the robber barons. So that infected the psyche of everyone in our country about money. And by the way, I was talking to a professor at a university in Michigan just a week or 2 ago, and she was telling me that the younger kids, their first recollection of the economy and money was the 08-09 Great Recession.
Wow, yeah.
And so they got like a double dose. So they got a grandfather that thinks rich people are crooks. And then when they were 10 years old, they saw their dad go bankrupt in his business during the Great Recession of 08-09. And so you got kids today that are 25 years old, you know, or 20 years old, and they're thinking, well, you know, wealth is not within my reach, right? I saw my dad go bankrupt. My grandpa told me they had to swap chickens, you know, for clothing when he was a kid.
Right.
And so we get these really negative expectations, right? So, and that focuses these limiting beliefs. So you got to get focused on what you want. Number 2, you got to get deeply emotionally committed, which is writing it down like I did. Write out all the things that you want, the things you have to do. You don't have to stick it on your cell wall with toothpaste, but write it down on a sheet of paper. And then the key is what I call a daily quiet time ritual. And you referred to it as meditating. It is kind of that. It's 15 minutes a day reviewing your plan, visualizing what it would be like when you have all those things. 15 minutes a day over your coffee, whatever, sitting quietly, picturing those things, right? Remember, Napoleon Hill said, imagine yourself already in possession of these things, right? Step 3 is action. You have to take consistent action with the things you want, the things you have to do. Here's what's so cool about the action part: cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the anxiety we feel when we don't do something we said we would do. So if I tell you, Sean, I'm going to pick you up at the mall at 3 o'clock and then I forget, I get dissonance. I get anxiety, like, damn, I forgot to pick up Sean, right? So here's what happens. You get up in the mornings and you do your quiet time ritual and you read, I earn $500,000 a year. I make 10 cold calls per day. I run every call with passion and purpose, right? And you read that, you visualize that $500,000. And then you go to work the next day or later that day and you don't do your 10 cold calls. Guess what you're going to feel? Dissonance, because you told yourself you would. Yeah. How do you get rid of dissonance? You got to do the thing. And when you start doing the thing, you're going to produce the results. So the Mother Nature will take over if you follow the process. Figure out what you want, write it down, review it every single day, go out there. Dissonance will drive those behaviors. The final step, responsibility, and that's as simple as your life is a reflection of your decisions, not your problems, and your decisions are your responsibility. It's a very simple, practical 4-step way to permanently change your thinking.
I think it's extremely powerful. Let me, how familiar are you with the automotive industry, like dealerships or dealer groups?
I'm not super familiar. I've got a couple of buddies of mine. One buddy owns 3 or 4 dealerships in Colorado Springs. Another buddy owns a couple of dealerships down in Pueblo, about a half an hour from us. So I'm not super familiar. I've done some work with them, intermittently, almost like a favor stuff. I've done some training. A buddy of mine's got a Land Rover and a Jaguar dealership, and they were having a problem. They had a great close rate once they got people from the test drive into the building,
right?
But they were having a hard time getting people to do that. So we developed some ways to get people from the test drive into the office, because once they got them in the office, they had a great success rate.
Let me. The reason why I ask is I want to give you, from my perspective, with 21 years in automotive, some of the things that are plaguing, almost like as a pandemic, our industry. First and foremost is attrition. The automotive industry has between a 70 and 80% attrition rate. That means the average dealership only has 10 salespeople. 7 or 8 of them are not going to be there at the same time next year. So, but yet on the flip side, they spend a tremendous amount of money in marketing and advertising. Roughly, they spend about $64,000 a month to sell less than 100 cars. So what that means is they spend literally about $640 per car sold in advertisement, but the average dealership spends less than $1,000 a month in training and less than $100 per salesperson. My question to you is, I think it's a correlation. You have mediocrity, you have attrition, but yet owners and general managers spend most of their time on marketing, advertising, rather than professional and team development. So what type of advice do you have for not the salespeople, but the owners and executive managers in dealerships, and how, like Cubby says, change your paradigm, see, do, get. So let's go on that. I want to kind of let you flow on that for a minute. I've given you the current major problem in our industry. What would you suggest at a macro level, using the Cubby see, do, get model, maybe as an illustrator?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love the see, do, get metaphor, because if we look at, so how do we change that? Well, let's stop and think about the owner of a dealership. How do I see the value of my people?
Yes.
If I see my value of people as they're lazy, they're irresponsible, they're not talented, then how much am I going to invest into that person? Not very much. If I see the marketing as the key to my success, then that's where I'm going to put my resources, which according to statistics you just cited is clearly what's happening. So the reality is we've got to change our perspective on the value of people. There was a great book written by a guy, I can't remember his first name. His last name was Sewell. He's a big car guy down in Texas. And he wrote a book called The Customer Comes Second, and put all of the value on the people, his people, right? If you empower your people, they're going to go out and serve your customers. We've got to look at people as the valuable resource. And yes, you can do the ROI on it and start and think about what it costs to facilitate that 70% turnover. And it's going to be really, really expensive. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in the car industry that I know, they look at people as an expendable resource, get them in here and let them sell everybody they know and then let them move on. Well, that's a short-term strategy. So once I see people as this valuable asset, what am I going to do? I'm going to take a little bit of that marketing money and I'm going to invest in my people. I'm going to help them get a better mindset and a better process. And that, of course, is going to get the results that I want, right? So I know a good friend of mine sells Cadillacs. He's been at the dealership for 20 some odd years. And of course, he's built such an amazing career because now he's selling to the grandchildren of his first customers. And, it's like his life is way less stressful than the average car guy because his whole situation now is referrals and repeat business, right? So what's wrong with that? Let's invest in that type of person, and of course you got to put a check in their hand, right? You got to put a check in their hand. And I will tell you this, I just hired a guy for a heating and air conditioning company that I own. And I bought 6 trucks from him a couple of weeks ago. He worked at the dealership and he was the commercial sales guy, such a good guy. And we ended up recruiting him away and bringing him in. I'm doing some training with him next week to do residential sales. And you know what the key, he loved his job. He made great money. He was earning a nice 6-figure income. He loved the guy he worked for. In fact, he just about brought him to tears to leave his manager because his manager had, shaped him and molded and worked with him. You know what the number one reason he left was? Quality of life. He wanted a little more time with his wife. So we've got to decide, I think, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, what is the balance? Every other industry in the world understands that balance. There's got to be some quality of life. When we see that as a priority, we'll invest in that, put some money to people who will make a career out of selling cars and stay there. But I think what's happened is, and listen, this is not all the owner's fault, right? The cynicism and skepticism they feel sometimes is a reflection of the reality they've experienced. So maybe we got to look at our skepticism, our cynicism, and say, hey, maybe it's not just about grinding people out. Maybe I need to find better people and invest in those people. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, like I said, I don't know the car business like you, or certainly not like your listeners, right? I'm just talking.
These are philosophies and strategies that transcends vertical. So this is why I like having subject matter experts from outside the automotive, because if you keep doing what you're doing or keep listening to what you're listening to, keep hearing what you're hearing, you're going to get the same results. So that's why I am excited to have someone like you outside of our vertical. I mean, I've been in the business 21 years, and it's been a pandemic of hemorrhaging and attrition for 20 plus years. So they're not doing something. Now let's redirect. I want to totally redirect and just pivot here. Fun. All right. I don't get that much opportunity to talk to, high level people that have been in prison. Like, as you know, my story, I spent 2 years in prison myself. And I like to talk about something called convict ingenuity. What that means to me is that there are some really ingenious convicts who've got nothing but time to actually think of shit and how to do. So I want you to go back to your prison days and say, have you ever MacGyvered anything legally? I'm just saying, as far as whether the hookup sandwiches, whether it's food, it's electricity, it's happened instead of a lighter using batteries. I'll tell you a story about me in a second, but I would love to just ask you, give me a couple examples of your convict ingenuity, brother. Come on. Hit him.
Man, I'm going to tell you, that's so interesting. You just took me back 30 years to 1988, 89. I was in Canyon City, Colorado, in the prison there. It was Christmas time, and I was in a building that was 100 years old, that was a center block building. The heating didn't work, and I remember being so cold that you would sleep in your blankets and your coat and your clothes, everything you could, to get some heat. It was a miserable experience, and there was no hot water in the building during this particular cold snap. I don't know if the pipes are broken or what, but I'm in my cell with a guy, and he says, "Don't even worry about it. We'll get hot water." And I was a fish, dude. This was 87. I was my first couple of months in the joint.
Right.
I was 23 years old, and so he gets a razor. And he breaks all the plastic stuff off. He's got 2 small, thin razor blades. He takes a piece of cardboard and he puts between them and takes a piece of string that he had and tied them together. So if you could think of like an ice cream sandwich,
yes,
with the razor blades on either side, in the middle is a piece of cardboard, so they're not touching each other. Then he takes 2 small pieces of wire, runs a hot and a negative off each of the razor blades. And we had these big, 32-ounce plastic cups. And he dropped the razor blades in the cardboard down in the glass of water, went to the light socket and put one in the hot and one in the negative. And I'm telling you, within 30 seconds, that water was boiling. I'm thinking, this dude's going to kill himself, right? And
yeah.
He called it a stinger, which I'm sure you've seen a million times.
Yes, absolutely.
And it would heat that water, man. Within 30 seconds, that water was boiling. It was like, talk about necessity being the mother of invention. You're right, because the guys got so much time on their hands. And oh my God, the stuff they'd make tattoo guns out of. Take a motor out of anything and turn it into a tattoo gun. It was absolutely, and it really is kind of a little heartbreaking too, because that shows you the level of ingenuity that's in
yes.
there. That's always misapplied.
I got one for you, brother. Check this out. I'm going to take you back. So I was in MCC federal pretrial, which is Manhattan, and 9 South is ad seg. I got into some stupid fight or whatever. So I'm in there. And you weren't allowed to have any lighters or anything like that. So at that time, I was only 19 years old. I'm going to be 43 next week, so that tells us a long time ago. But I used to smoke cigarettes at that time. So here's what I had to do. I basically had one of the orderlies, give me a pack of Newports. I'll never forget. I take the aluminum foil outside to the inside of the cigarettes. I lay it flat down. I take a pencil and I rip the eraser off and I bite down on the metal part of the pencil tip, where the eraser is. So that's my little razor blade. So I wasn't even in the hole. You weren't allowed to have any razors for shaving nothing. You know what I mean? So then from there, what I would do is I cut a really thin strip, out of the aluminum, and then I would make. Well, look up for a second. I'd make this like almost like a pyramid type thing, and then I take 2 batteries. I take a double for my Walkman, a AA battery facing positive up, positive down, and I circulate the current. I wasn't skilled enough to make the flame and light my cigarette, so I used to have to get the toilet paper tissue, right? I put it in my mouth and I wind it up like this. So look at it. I have the ground. I got the 2 batteries and I got that 1 strip. I put it there and poof, a little flame pops up, and that's how I used to light my cigarettes in the hole, like dead serious. The reason why I bring this up is about the convict ingenuity. As an entrepreneur, you have to, in my opinion, creative. You've got to MacGyver shit. I believe in an acronym called FITFO. Figure it the fuck out. You know what I mean? Or figure the fudge out if this is a Christian listening. You know what I mean? Respectfully, however you want to use the F word, fudge or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you want to be warm, you're going to use a stinger. If you want to smoke a cigarette, you're going to circulate the current. And, when you are stripped down to your raw essentials, where you've only got like the environment around you, you've got to either figure it out or go without a cigarette or go without heat or go without food. Too many times, I believe nowadays, like everybody wants to be like a social entrepreneur, meaning that they're just rich by watching Facebook. They don't know that real. Look at Brad Lee. Look at Cardone. Look at you. Look at me. Look at our real opportunities. Don't just fall out of the sky. They come, but you've got to be ready to engage them with veracity and just really whatever you got to do creative-wise to make shit happen, whatever it takes. Do you agree with that or no?
Absolutely. Listen, my philosophy is very similar. I break it down to its essence that your success in life is a reflection of how well you can deal with bullshit.
Yes.
If you can deal with bullshit very well, you're going to be successful. If bullshit gets you down and keeps you down, you're going to struggle. So it's successful entrepreneurship, successful salesmanship, successful anything is about being a good problem solver. And you cannot solve problems if you're overwhelmed by them. You got to solve problems by keeping them in perspective. So, look at your ability to deal with bullshit, because bullshit's coming into life, right? That scene from Tombstone after Wyatt Earp's one of his brothers got shot, the other one got killed, and he's on the train station. He's going out looking for the red bandana guys, and he says, you tell him Wyatt Earp's coming and hell's coming with him, right? Life's coming and bullshit's coming with it. And your ability to deal with that bullshit will determine how successful you are.
Amen. I want to say this, and I'm going to transition to you speaking at the conference, but I want to just close this out because, again, it's very rare that I get high-level people that unfortunately were incarcerated. For the record, audience, I don't recommend that people just go get locked up for basic training purposes. But what I'm trying to say here is, Weldon, for me, being in prison, and you were in there like a lot longer than I was, but 3 years is plenty for a 19-year-old kid for me. It's a whole other universe because you don't have Gucci belts, Versace this, you don't have bullshit like Facebook, likes. You're stripped down to your rawest form. You're either a man or you're a bitch. You know what I mean? I don't mean in a predatory way. I just mean you're either a real person or you're fake. You don't have like these little facades you could hide behind. And in prison, there's a lot of sociology and there's a lot of things you have to learn how to do, from commerce, whether it's having a store, whether it's like, selling cigarettes or tobacco, depending on what institution you're in, whether it's the conjugal ingenuity, whether it's dealing with different people, because in prison, it's based by race. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of politics, prison politics. There's a lot of shit that if you could survive in prison as a man, not as a fucking bitch or as a terrorist, you know what I mean, in there, it could, and you decide to do well with your life, it really was a transformation for me because I realized how to really deal with people and how to overcome adversity, how to overcome disappointment, how to be patient. That's the one thing that I can't articulate enough. What prison is, it's fucking, you have to develop patience, bro. And you have to develop respect. Yeah. And people don't realize if you turn around and reach over a man's food or you walk on somebody's floor after they just spent an hour buffing that shit, you got to turn around and be able to handle yourself or be cognizant and show respect everywhere you go. Many times in the real world, there isn't respect. There's a lot of facades. There's a lot of fake bullshit. I want your opinion on what type of lessons did you learn in prison, the good ones, you know what I mean? Like that you take into your day-to-day activities that have shaped you towards the man you are today.
Yeah, well, first I'm going to comment on the two you just mentioned, the respect that you mentioned. The reality is in the real world out here, there's zero margin for error. There's instant accountability for disrespect to the penitentiary because it's such a valued commodity. It's all we have. Right. And so in the real world, you can cut somebody off in traffic and, or you can bump into somebody in the mall. No, I'm sorry. In the penitentiary, you learn real quick, there's zero margin for error. If you disrespect somebody, there's zero accountability. Another lesson I learned is, ironically, financial responsibility.
Yes.
Pay your bills on time. You owe somebody 2 for 1, 3 for 1 for a bag of chips, you better pay up on commissary day, because not paying your bills on time can be seriously damaging to your health, right? Yeah. You learn accountability in the penitentiary because it's like a jungle. There's instant consequence. If you steal from somebody and get caught, like in the real world, you go to jail, you might sit there for 6 months and cut a plea bargain. In the penitentiary, you get caught for stealing something, you're getting your ass beat on the spot. You disrespect, as you mentioned, instant accountability, right? So I think the accountability factor, which I translate into personal responsibility, was probably the second most powerful lesson I learned, sitting in penitentiary systems for 13 years. The first most powerful lessons is that you can control your emotional state if you control your thoughts. You can be in a very bad situation, and if you can continue to think in a positive, productive, affirmative way, you can feel a productive, positive, affirmative feeling. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about this a lot. When you can no longer control the things around you, you're left to control the only thing you can, which is yourself and your thoughts. And I learned that lesson in prison as well, that if you control your thoughts, you can control your emotional state. You mentioned patience, right? That's another one that you have to learn that things take a little bit of time. And I think by nature, we're all pretty impatient, but things take time to happen. Dr. Covey, we've mentioned him several times, law of the harvest, right? There's, you can't try to ignore the law of the harvest. You can't go out in the fall and just start cultivating all the fields if you didn't do the work in the springtime. So I think that patience is a big one. Respect, instant accountability in there teaches you in life out here. And I guess another really important lesson is, I think I learned how to deal with bullshit by being in prison so long. You look at some of the stuff that gets people down. I mean, I'm living in a halfway house / shelter at 39 years old as a 9th grade high school dropout, a 3-time convicted felon, and I got nothing, right? All I had in my life, Sean, one of my old cellies who got out before I did had sent me $200 and some clothes. That's all I had to my name. And I hear people bitching about, I got divorced, or I went bankrupt 10 years ago. My boss was an asshole. Really? I mean, get over it. Deal with your bullshit and move on. I saw this great video that Will Smith, the actor, did on YouTube. He's like, people get the concept of fault and responsibility mixed up. They act like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault, as if it's not their responsibility. Well, guess what? It may not be your fault something happened, but it's your responsibility to fix it. It may not be your fault your mom was a drunk. It may not be your fault that your dad beat the shit out of you, but it's your responsibility to be a responsible adult anyway. Hey, and that's where people get confused.
Brother, shit, the fuck end right there. That is very powerful. A lot of people have the victim mentality, and again, you don't have to. Covey talks about, that proactive mindset. Again, that's important. Circle of influence versus circle of concern. I try not to focus on shit I don't have control over. The things that we have control over, to your point, is your attitudes, thoughts, actions, and behaviors. And you could choose to turn around and live in the paradigm of it's my fault. Then the whole purpose of the 7 habits is the evolution from that dependent or codependent mindset to independence. And that's where I was at. When I came home, I was in the independence mindset. Now as I'm in my 40s and I understand from experience that the true benefit, true nirvana is interdependence. And so that's why I think that I love the whole Coveyism, because it gives you that roadmap to transcend from that primitive mindset of victimization or victim mentality or codependence or dependent into that next level, which independence, then obviously ultimately to interdependence. So with that being said, I'm just blown away. I can just keep talking your ear off. You're going to be our keynote speaker at the upcoming Internet Sales 20 Group Conference on November 11th, 12th, and 13th in Houston, Texas. What are you going to be speaking at? Talk to the dealers. What is your message going to be about? How's it going to affect them at the dealerships? What can they take away? What can they get from it?
Yeah, we're going to take a deep dive in how to create the mindset to be successful. A lot of times, we all kind of associate certain personalities and mindsets with success. You think of the most successful person, they tend to be positive, optimistic, abundance mentality. We look at losers. We operate under the misconception sometimes that we either have the abundance positive mindset or we're not. Like we're lucky to have it, or some people are unlucky to have it. The reality is you can create it, right? You can create the prosperity mindset. And what I'm going to be talking about at your event, a deep dive into how do you create the prosperity mindset? How do you permanently change your thoughts by changing the neural connectors in your brain? When The Power of Consistency came out, I got a call from a guy, a PhD and a clinical psychologist, a neuroscientist. And he calls me up and he says, Mr. Long, I got to tell you something. This book is the simplest explanation of the neuroscience behind success and the principles that are the underpinnings of rationally emotive behavior therapy that I've ever read in my life. And I'm like, there's a name for this shit? So I keep it real simple and basic, right? I went to jail, not Yale, right? I went to the state pen, not Penn State, and all those kind of, jokes. But the bottom line is I teach it from a very realistic, practical, street level perspective. How do you permanently change your mindset? And then we're going to probably talk about some sales concepts too, right? Some simple, basic things we can do to improve our sales performance. We're going to combine those two and hang out with you and hang out with your audience and your students. And we're really looking forward to it. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, listen, we are truly honored to have you as our keynote speaker, man. Shout out to David Delgado for, kind of politicking this. I don't know if you know, but Bradley's also going to be a featured speaker there as well. So Brad's going to be there. Shep Hyken is going to be there. We're super excited. I do want to close on this, though. I want to redirect one more time and go to the 180 aspect of things. What do you find fulfilling in your life now? I do believe you do speakings. You go back to prisons and kind of share your experience. Tell me what moves you in your heart and in your soul, as far as, for the world. What is your mission? What are you looking to do to help people? How are you perpetuating the spirit of covenant?
Yeah, that's a great question. When my first book came out in 2009, it's called The Upside of Fear. And I was fortunate enough, I got endorsements from Dr. Covey, but also got an endorsement from Tony Robbins. And Robbins' endorsement on that book says, congratulations on your turnaround from prison to contribution. Wow. He didn't say prison to a house on Maui or prison to a Ferrari. He said your contribution. And the older I've gotten, the more I've learned. I'm 55 now. I've learned more how important the contribution aspect is. And yes, I do go into prisons, 10, 12 times a year. There have been programs. A young man who just got out, he did 18 years when he was a 20-year-old man. He was out one night being stupid. They ran from the cops and somebody pulled a gun and took a shot at the cop, and they didn't hurt him. They didn't kill him. They didn't hit him, but he got 40 years in prison. He did 18 years. He just got out. And I met him when he was in prison. He developed a program for convicts based on my books. And so I go into penitentiaries. I see these programs where guys are using my books. There's a program in the federal system called Doing Time with the Right Mind. And my books are part of the curriculum in that program. And that's so rewarding to go in and I hear guys teaching my concepts and applying them to the challenges they're facing on the yard every day. And there's nothing quite like it. And Sean, to be honest with you, another thing, I know we're going to get you in one of these trips with me pretty soon.
I'll be honored.
One of the things that is so cool is that it reminds me where I come from. One of the things that people always tell me is I'm a very simple, open, a transparent guy. And I think part of that is because I've spent so many years going back in the penitentiary. Listen, I went back to the federal joint in FCI Florence, where I spent the second half of the 90s a number of years ago. And my old cellie there, I went back in my old cell. I had left that facility 15 years, before that time. And I went back to they took me down to my old cell. My old cellie was still in there.
Oh my God.
Now, he was doing life, so I knew he'd be in the joint somewhere. Hadn't occurred to me he'd be in the same cell 15 years later. And you talk about something to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground. I don't ever get too far away, from remembering where I came from, right? So I keep it pretty simple and pretty real.
Well, first of all, damn, that's a powerful, inspiring statement, man. God bless you for what you're doing. And I got to say this is that 3 years is way different from 13 years. But for me, I'm excited to be able to go with you on one of these trips or a couple of these trips. I would be honored to be able to do so. One of the things that I always, because I grew up crazy in Brooklyn, you know what I mean? Like Brooklyn life is different than every other, like Brooklyn and Queens. And a lot of times these kids, you know, they don't fathom, like before I went to jail, I never even fathomed my life like today. You know, I never fathomed that I could be an author. I could be, you know, married with kids and be respectable and have multiple companies, yada, yada, yada. And what most people have, unfortunately, are like people that get reformed or find Jesus or change. These people don't get both. They don't get evolution or get out and get profound success. A lot of these people become social workers or they're air conditioning repair people. And I believe that a lot of these, especially the youth, they can't relate to that. Like, why the hell am I going to fucking listen to you, dude? Like, you found Jesus, all this shit, and what you got is your air conditioner repairman. You're grinding for a hustle. But when people see people become multimillionaires, successful, not just money-wise, but they have a great family life. They got great kids, a great, like, you know, like love, friendships, relationships, community, etc. Now there's a lot more hope. And so I just think that I want to just commend you because you're not just talking about it, you're going back and you're giving back and you're contributing to people in a very powerful way. Like I said, I want to stress that there are social workers, there are people that go and speak, ex-gang members, but they have not achieved the profound status and success that you have. And there is a difference. There's levels to this shit. So when you speak to somebody, they got to be like, holy fuck, if this guy could turn around and come from this shit to that, Jesus, I have a shot. And that is what I want to just close on is God bless you. You've been blessed and you're blessing other people. And you have my eternal gratitude and respect, brother. Bro.
Well, Sean, the feeling is mutual, my friend. And I really enjoyed chatting with you today. And I'm really excited, even more excited after this conversation of getting down to spend some time with you and your group down in Houston. I'm really looking forward to it. And I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Listen, my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you like it, you love it, you want more of it, then don't wait for the next money show. Just go to bradleyondemand.com and take your career to the next level.